Autumn dawn in the small town of Forge River, Missouri, always had a calm quality. Locals say that this silence with the taste of cool air reminds us of the close approach of winter. Grand Mitchell, a powerfully built 39-year-old man with slightly graying temples, opened his garage door. He liked this time of day, the sounds of waking up birds, the hum of cars on a distant highway, the light smoke from coffee. But this morning, something inside him told him, changes are coming, and they won't be pleasant. "Dad, will you take me to school?" The voice of the 15-year-old daughter, Annie, sounded from the direction of the house. "Of course, honey." "Get ready, I'll be ready soon," he shouted back, mechanically checking the tools on the workbench. His daughter was his whole world. Annie went to Grand after his first unsuccessful marriage. His ex-wife Laura died in an accident. Since then, Grand raised Annie alone until 5 years ago Cassandra appeared in his life, who became his second wife and, at first, seemed like a gift from fate. But over the past year, something began to break in the relationship between Grand and Cassandra. She worked a lot as an administrator at a local dental clinic, often stayed late, and even seemed to lose interest in Grand. He explained this by fatigue, life stresses while he did not want to think about the worst. "Grand, will you be there soon?" Cassandra's own voice came from inside the house. "Yes, Cass, we're on our way," he replied and put the hammer back in place. Entering the house, he saw his wife standing at the mirror in the hallway. Cassandra looked businesslike, a strict pencil skirt, a light blouse, and neat makeup. Although she was already over 30, she carefully looked after her appearance and often heard compliments. At the same time, in the depths of Cassandra's eyes, Grand noticed something cold that was lurking there more and more often. "From this evening, I will be late," she announced, without taking her eyes off the reflection. "Is something urgent?" he asked, tying his shoelaces. "Well, the boss asked to stay longer. We have a new project. We're expanding the clinic, hiring new assistants." She shrugged, as if making excuses. "Understood." "Okay, let's call you in the evening," Grand answered. He kissed her cheek, smelling the faint scent of her perfume. Previously, when he did this, she always turned around, smiled, and hugged his neck. Now she just nodded briefly. Grand felt a sharp pain inside, but continued to pretend that everything was fine. Together with Annie, they left the house, got into a dark gray Ford pickup truck, and moved along a small street lined with plane trees. The crowns of the trees were covered with yellow leaves. The sun rises above the horizon, coloring the light in amber tones, and for some reason Grand thought about how often the color yellow is associated with betrayal. "Dad, why are you so thoughtful?" the daughter asked, looking up from the phone screen. "Yes, well, things are at work. You know, we have a contract for the renovation of warehouse premises. There are a lot of nuances there." "Oh, I see," Annie said, returning to her correspondence on the social network. In fact, Grand didn't care much about work. He was the owner of a small construction company that was generating little but steady income. He was much more worried about Cassandra's behavior, and my relationship with my daughter is difficult due to adolescence. But he didn't complain. He considered himself a strong man who knew how to take a punch and solve problems. After dropping Annie off at school, Grand went to meet his childhood friend, Patrick O'Neill. Patrick ran a car repair shop on the outskirts of the city and at the same time was selling used cars. He was 3 years older than Grand, prematurely bald, but had a calm and reasonable character. "Hello, buddy," Patrick greeted when Grand looked into his office. "Great. How are you?" Grand asked, sitting down on a shabby chair. "Yes, not bad, although the recent hurricane damaged my sign." "How are you?" "It is written on the face that something is wrong." "Yes, listen, I have a strange feeling about Cassandra," Grand admitted. "She has been cold lately and is often late at work. I don't want to be paranoid, but you know." "Do you think someone at work has their eye on her?" Patrick raised an eyebrow. "I understand that such things happen. I don't want to think about the worst. I trust her, but I'm somehow uneasy in my soul." "Listen," Patrick squinted. "Maybe you should talk to her normally, ask what's going on. You are family." "Yes, I tried." She says everything is fine, just a lot of work, tired, and all that. Grundy, of course, I don't have an example of an ideal marriage, but in my experience, you have to keep your eyes open. If there is nothing, then she will tell you everything herself. And if there is, it's better to find out sooner rather than later, Patrick concluded. The conversation stirred up the anxiety already itching inside Grand. He hated the feeling of jealousy and tried to extinguish it to the last. However, memories of Laura, his late wife, often surfaced. With her, there was never any doubt. She was extremely honest and open. Cassandra, on the other hand, was different, passionate, intelligent, seemingly unselfish, but sometimes Grand noted her tendency to manipulate. I'm probably making this up, he thought, smiling weakly at Patrick. Thanks, man. Maybe everything will really work out, he said, standing up. Yes, and remember, if you want to check, check. Don't worry, this is your marriage. Your wife is, after all, your life. But no hysterics, okay? In the evening, Grand prepared a simple but delicious dinner steak with mashed potatoes, green salad, and homemade lemonade. Annie studied homework in her room, and Cassandra returned at the very end of preparations, around 9. She looked tired, but happy. There was something shining in the eyes that Grand could not immediately recognize. How was your day? He asked, handing her a plate. Okay, she rubbed her neck, looking at the steak without much enthusiasm. Sorry, I'm not very hungry. Cass, I tried. Eat at least a little. Okay, she answered briefly, took a fork and began picking at the potatoes. They sat in awkward silence for several minutes. Then Grand felt that he could not stand it. Maybe you can tell me what's going on at work. I want to understand what exhausts you so much. Everything is fine there, really. Just a lot of clients. I'm trying to show that I deserve a promotion, she answered evasively. You're not on the front line, not in surgery, right? He tried to joke. Sorry, she grinned, but her laugh sounded artificial. It's just that lately I don't know. I think you're putting pressure on me. It almost sounded like an accusation. Grand frowned. Shall I press? How? Because I want to understand why the woman I love is moving away. Don't start, she waved him off, putting the plate aside. I said everything is fine. At that moment, Annie looked into the kitchen. Mom, hi. How's your day? She asked neutrally, as if she really wasn't sure that her mother would respond warmly. Hello, honey. Fine. Sorry, I'm tired. I'll go take a shower. Cassandra quickly got up from the table and disappeared into the bathroom. Grand and Annie looked at each other. Dad, maybe she just needs time, suggested the daughter. Maybe, he nodded, holding back a sad smile. That evening, he and Annie washed the dishes in silence. Thoughts were spinning in Grand's head. Everything is so strange. It's like she's trying not to talk about something important. A week has passed. The usual life went on as usual, but the tension between the spouses did not subside. Grand no longer tried to pin his wife against the wall with questions, because he understood. This would only irritate her. Instead, he decided to observe and, if necessary, resort to more drastic action. It was a hot day at the construction site where his crew was renovating storage areas. The concrete walls were heating up under the sun, and construction dust was flying. Grand stood in a helmet, supervising the delivery of construction materials. His assistant, a 17-year-old guy named Oliver, tried to please in everything. Mr. Mitchell, the cement has arrived. Where to unload it? At the western wall, Ollie, there's space there. Make sure they don't block the passage, Grand answered and smiled slightly. The guy was diligent, but timid. Usually, work helped Grand to get distracted and immerse himself in the world of drawings and assembly structures. But today my thoughts kept returning to Cassandra. He remembered Patrick's phrase, if you want to check, check. The desire to find out the truth, no matter how bitter the knowledge turned out to be, was hatched in him. Oliver, keep an eye on me. I'll be gone for a while. Of course, boss. I will do everything right. Grand got into a pickup truck and drove to the dental clinic where Cassandra worked. He knew that to act this way was to show distrust, but the premonition was stronger. He parked across the street near a coffee shop and bought himself an espresso to go. The clock showed 14:30. Cassandra usually has lunch before 15 o'clock. If she really stays late solely for work, then she is unlikely to run out with someone. But Grand decided to at least see if everything was okay. Sitting in the car, he peered into the clinic window. Twice employees came out, young girls in uniform, but Cassandra was not there. Maybe she's having lunch on the spot. 15 minutes later, Cassandra appeared through the glass door, with a phone to her ear and a smile on her lips. Going out into the street, she quickly went to the neighboring building, where a restaurant serving Mediterranean cuisine was located. In the hall, Grand managed to notice a male figure in an expensive suit who greeted Cassandra with obvious joy. The man stood up and lightly touched her elbow, inviting her to sit down. Grand felt something break inside him. It could be a client, it could be a boss, it could just be a friend, he told himself, but his heart was beating like crazy. About half an hour passed. Cassandra walked out with the same man, laughing at something. He walked her to the clinic and then shook her hand. For a moment, the man leaned close to her face, as if he wanted to kiss or whisper something in her ear. Cassandra smiled, but quickly took a step back. They said goodbye warmly, and she disappeared behind the door of her work. Probably the boss, Grand thought, trying to suppress a flash of jealousy. However, a light touch on the elbow, an excited look, a tense smile, it was quite intimate. Or was it just his imagination? Damn it, I don't want to be a jealous idiot, he muttered under his breath. Returning to the construction site, Grand had difficulty concentrating on business. He decided to keep everything a secret for now, not even to tell Patrick. We need more facts, he told himself, before blaming his wife or starting a scandal. In the evening, Grand noticed that Annie was sitting too quietly in her room. She usually listened to music or watched videos on the internet. He knocked and entered. The girl was leafing through a checkered notebook that looked like a personal diary. "Everything is fine?" he asked, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "Well, I'm thinking about different things here." She closed the notebook, but did not hide it. "Dad, did you know where Mom was today? She promised to go to the pharmacy and buy me something, but she arrived very late. She said she was late at work again," he said. "Aha, I see." Annie frowned, then suddenly asked, "Do you love her?" "What kind of question?" "Of course I do," Grand answered, surprised by his daughter's frankness. "She's changed a lot, you know. She and I used to go shopping together, discuss clothes and all sorts of girly things, but now, she's always busy and irritated. I don't know, maybe I'm interfering." "You're not in the way," Grand shook his head, taking her hand. "I'll try to work things out, okay?" "Dad, I'm afraid that everything might end in divorce like the parents of my friends." She looked at him with wide eyes. "Hey," he smiled softly, but the smile came out sad. "Don't get ahead of yourself, okay? Everything will be fine." However, Grand himself felt that there was a heavy burden on his soul, and he could not just ignore it. A day later, Grand returned home early and saw a small cardboard box on the doorstep labeled with Cassandra's name. Curiosity got the better of him, because he didn't know the sender's last name, something like Terry and Boone's Fashion. This is clearly some kind of private package, perhaps a gift or an order from an online store. He carried the box inside. Usually Cassandra sorted out her packages herself, but Grand somehow wanted to understand what exactly she was ordering without telling him. He carefully cut the tape with a knife, trying not to crush the contents. Inside was a lacy set of lingerie, extremely revealing, and accompanied by a note. "You'll look amazing in this, Cass. I can't wait. L." Grand's hands went cold. "L? Who is L?" "So, obviously not the boss, whose name is Michael. Did someone order this lingerie for her, or did she order it at someone's request?" The note appears to be handwritten, short, undated. Panic, resentment, and anger flared up in Grand's head. He quickly put everything back in place and sealed the box. "Damn you, Cassandra," he whispered. Now there was no doubt. Cassandra receives gifts from some L, which means there is another man. Grand could no longer cling to the naive hopes that it was all just a boss or just a client. So what now? He wanted to lash out at his wife in anger, call her right now and ask what was going on. But something in his head did not allow him to do this immediately. Maybe this was his inner cry. Calm down, Grand, do everything wisely. One way or another, he returned the box to its place as if he had not touched anything. Let her open it herself and think that he knows nothing. Well, Cassandra, he said through his teeth, the game has begun. When there are children in a marriage, starting an open war means risking their psyche. Grand understood this well. He saw how Annie perceived any quarrel in the family and did not want to hurt her more. But I don't intend to tolerate betrayal either. As the days passed, his determination grew to collect evidence of infidelity, so that during the divorce, Cassandra would not be able to reproach him unreasonably. At first, Grand decided to quietly consult with the family's lawyer, Beverly Sanders. She was an old friend of his family and helped arrange the inheritance after Laura's death. Beverly received Grand in her office, which was filled with files and legal references. "Good afternoon, Grand. What brings you to me?" she asked, smiling affectionately at him. "I don't want to beat around the bush, Bev," he said, sitting down opposite her. "I suspect that my wife is cheating on me. I want to understand, if I decide to file for divorce, what the right thing to do is to protect myself and Annie. Clear. First, tell me, do you and Cassandra have a prenuptial agreement?" "No, when we got married, I didn't even think that it would be necessary." "Understand. Next, how sure are you of her cheating?" "Now at 99%. But I want to have ironclad proof. When dividing property, facts are important to us. For example, correspondence, photos, videos, testimony of witnesses. If you present infidelity as a reason for divorce, this may affect the court's decision, especially regarding alimony or child custody. But keep in mind that laws still tend towards equality." "I understand. She's not Annie's mother. Annie is my daughter from my first marriage, but Cassandra has helped raise her for the last 5 years. This simplifies the situation because she cannot claim custody of a child who is not legally her own. But if there is jointly acquired property, negotiations will need to be held." "Okay," Grand nodded. "I need a good plan. I don't want to make a scandal. I want to act in such a way that my conscience is clear." Then the first rule: collect evidence. Secondly, do not enter into conflicts that may negatively affect your business. Third, think about the financial aspects: accounts, assets, real estate. If she decides to leave, she may try to reclaim some of the funds, especially if she can prove that she contributed to the general welfare. Grand nodded, feeling a calm determination emerge within him. Now he has a vector to carefully but systematically find out the truth, to prepare the ground. "Thank you, Bev. I don't know yet when I'll decide to take official steps, but I want to be ready. I'm always in touch," the lawyer smiled. As Grand left Beverly's office, he noticed a sign in the hallway with the name Slayton. He was a private detective who conducted various types of investigations. The idea of turning to the detective instantly flashed through his head. Isn't this too much? Surveillance? But damn, she already seems to be completely overplayed. Returning home and seeing that Cassandra was not yet there, Grand dialed the number indicated on the business card that he took from Beverly's reception. The hoarse voice of a man answered him. "Slayton, I'm listening." "Good afternoon. My name is Grant Mitchell. I would like to discuss possible cooperation in an adultery case." "Yeah, it happens. Come, let's talk." He sounded tired, as if the man did this every day. "Can you come by tomorrow at 10 in the morning?" "I'll come." After finishing the conversation, Grand felt a strange mixture of shame and relief. "Am I really ready for this?" he thought. But resentment and betrayal overpowered moral torment. "I want to know the truth, even the most bitter one." That evening, Cassandra returned around 11. Annie was already asleep, and Grand was sitting in the living room with the lights turned off, leaving only the floor lamp. This situation was reminiscent of scenes from a movie when the hero waits for a traitor at night. "Oh, are you still awake?" She was surprised, taking off her shoes. Waiting for you. I miss you, he forced himself to smile, but his voice sounded tense. Nice, Cassandra said, walking past him. He noticed that she was wearing new stockings, and the scent of perfume seemed unusually strong. Getting ready for a special evening? The thought pierced him, but Grand sighed, deciding not to arrange an interrogation. Cass, let's talk, he suggested, trying to remain calm. About what? She turned around. I'm tired. I want to take a bath and go to bed. Please, his voice sounded firmer. I need to understand what's happening to you. She rolled her eyes. Oh God, Grand, I've said it 100 times. Work, stress, personal problems. Can't you just leave me alone? Personal problems? He asked again. Yours or ours? It's better for you not to know about this, she answered coldly. Something inside Grand broke completely. He did not continue the conversation, he just nodded and said, Understood. Cassandra sighed, and there seemed to be a moment of guilt on her face. But she immediately turned away and disappeared into the bathroom. Grand felt that everything was heading towards a break, and the thirst for justice flared up in his soul. The next day, Grand took Annie to school, saw her off, and went to 14 Chester Street. A walk through the business district of the city was reminiscent of a quiet life, where office workers rushed to work with a mug of coffee, not thinking about family dramas. And now he is going to a private detective to expose his wife's infidelity. The situation seemed absurd, but he saw no other way out. Slayton's office was on the second floor of a shabby building with a non-working elevator. Grand climbed the creaky stairs and saw a door with a sign, Alan Slayton, private investigator. Inside there was a narrow room with a wooden table, a computer, and many folders on shelves. The detective himself, lean, about 50, with graying hair and a barely visible scar on his chin, invited Grand to sit down. So, Mr. Mitchell, tell me what's going on with you, Slayton said, lighting a cigarette. My wife, Cassandra, is probably cheating on me. I want to prove this so that I can have a strong position in the divorce. Grand told about all his suspicions, including the scene at the restaurant and the package with underwear. It's clear. I can set up surveillance and catch her at a meeting with her lover. This usually takes a week or two. The price depends on the amount of work, but the standard is $1,500 a week plus expenses. I have the means, Grand nodded. But are you sure you can collect evidence? Photos, videos? As a rule, yes. I'm a professional, Mr. Mitchell. Slayton shook the ashes into the ashtray. You just need to clearly know her schedule, car, habits. Let's write everything down. He took out a notepad, and Grand, with detailed persistence, described Cassandra's car model, license plate, schedule, and the times of her lunch breaks, when she usually said she was delayed. Slayton carefully recorded everything, asking clarifying questions. Are you sure your lover doesn't live nearby? Don't know. I don't even know who it is. There are initials L on the note, but her boss is Michael Carter, so it's not him. Maybe a colleague, a patient, anyone. Okay, let's find out. I have several tricks. Having finished, the detective shook Grand's hand. I'll start today. Send me a photo of your wife by email so I can identify her from afar. And don't warn her. Of course, Grand squeezed out a short grin. I wouldn't admit to her that I hired a detective, he thought. 2 days later, Grand was already receiving the first brief reports from Slayton. The detective said that Cassandra actually met with a certain man, Lance Hamilton, at that very restaurant. Then they drove Lance's car to a hotel outside the city. I have pictures, but not very clear yet. Stay tuned for further updates, Slayton said. Grand read the messages on his phone, feeling the flames of rage and pain burning inside him. But he still tried to look calm on the outside. He thought about how Cassandra calmly returned home, kissed him on the cheek as if nothing had happened, and lied to his face about long meetings. In the evening, when Cassandra was late again, Grand was preparing dinner for two, himself and Annie. My daughter came home from school tired and threw her backpack on the sofa. Where's Mom? Is it working again? She asked, sitting down at the table. Yes, I guess, Grand answered, shrugging his shoulders. Lately, I've been feeling like she's been slipping out of our lives, Annie began again. I understand that she is not my natural mother, but still we lived together for several years. I became attached to her. Annie, you're a smart girl, Grand said, trying to keep his voice even. Sometimes things happen in people's relationships that children shouldn't worry about. But believe me, I will do everything so that you don't suffer. Dad, don't hide the truth from me. I'm not little anymore. Okay, Grand sighed, but only a little later. I have nothing to tell you right now, except that we will figure it out. He touched his daughter's hand, and she smiled sadly. I believe you. Grand noted to himself that Annie was growing up to be unusually sensible. Perhaps the pain of losing her mother and the hardships she experienced strengthened her character. Later, when Annie went to do her homework, Grand was left alone in the living room. He picked up an old family album, which still contained photographs with Laura. In the photos, they looked carefree and happy. Then Grand was younger and not so tired of life. Laura always had amazing sincerity and directness, which was so much lacking in Cassandra now. Laura, what would you do if you were alive? He whispered, looking at the photo. Perhaps he would never have married Cassandra if it were not for the spiritual emptiness after the loss of Laura. He needed support, feminine warmth, and Cassandra seemed the embodiment of passion and care, and now everything is turning into a disaster. Footsteps on the porch distracted him. Cassandra walked in, smelling of someone else's perfume and smoke. Maybe Lance smoked, and the smell clung to her clothes. She pretended not to notice the album in Grand's hands. Hello, she said, taking off her coat. Hello, he closed the album and put it on the table. How's work? It's normal, just a blockage, a new shift, new clients. She spoke quickly, as if she had prepared a text in advance. Do you mind if I go straight to the shower? I'm so exhausted. Go, he nodded, without getting up from the sofa. When the door closed behind her, Grand reassured himself that he had nothing to hide. There was no point in accusing him directly. Now he would only collect more poison in response. But he knew he had Slayton, the photos, the facts. The truth will come out soon. The next day, on his way to work, Grand stopped by to see Patrick. He had just left his auto repair shop, wiping his hands with a rag. Hey, Grundy, how's life? He asked affably. So. I need to talk. Come into the office, let's have a cup of coffee. Patrick nodded towards his small office. Everything inside was simple. A table, a couple of chairs, a poster with a photo of a racing car. Patrick poured coffee from a thermos. Well, tell me what happened. Do you remember what I told you about the suspicions about Cassandra? So, it seems this is true. Grand looked at the floor. I found a bunch of evidence, underwear with someone else's note, dinners in restaurants, trips to the hotel. I hired a private detective. Wow, Patrick breathed. And what does the detective say? She says she has a lover named Lance Hamilton. I don't know all the details yet, but it's already clear. She's leading me by the nose. Crap. I'm sorry, buddy. Patrick lightly patted him on the shoulder. What are you going to do now? I'm collecting evidence. I want her not to be able to rob me when I file for divorce. Plus, I don't want Annie to get hurt. Right? Listen, Grand, just stay in your hands. I understand that rage and resentment are all serious. But if you lose control, you may lose control. Yes, I know. I try not to show emotions. Let her become entangled in her own lies. They were silent for a moment, sipping their coffee. If anything, I'm on your side, Patrick finally said. I'll help as much as I can. Thanks, buddy. That evening, Cassandra did what Grand had been waiting for, but he was still shocked. She stated that she was going to a professional seminar for the weekend in a nearby town. At that moment, the three of them were sitting at dinner in the living room. Annie was reading a textbook, and Grand looked indifferent. Seminar? Since when have you been going to seminars? He asked, trying to appear calm. Recently, she snapped coldly. Our boss said that I need to take courses in management in the field of medical services. It's clear. Where exactly are you going? To Springfield. There's the Rosemont Hotel there. I'll go with my colleagues. Grand caught how she avoided looking him in the eye. Annie sat pale, feeling that the conversation was tense. I hope you keep in touch. Of course, Cassandra stood up from the table as if she wanted to leave quickly. Annie, as Cassandra disappeared into the kitchen, whispered, Dad, she's lying, right? As HH, Grand shook his head. Babe, everything is under control. The next day, Cassandra left with a small suitcase. Grand called Slayton and told her about her business trip. The detective promised to trace the route. Later in the evening, around 3 in the morning, Grand could not sleep and read a report from Slayton. Cassandra and Lance Hamilton checked into the Greenleaf Hotel in the suburbs of Springfield. Not Rosemont. We have photos and videos. They're clearly having a romantic weekend. Grand felt boiling rage bubbling inside. Tears came to his eyes, but he held back. Traitor, he thought. How dare she lie so blatantly about the management school when in fact she is betraying him? He went out onto the porch of the house so as not to wake Annie, and there, looking at the moon, he realized the moment of truth was near. The hour is coming when he will reveal all his cards. But first, we need to complete the collection of evidence. And then, damn it, he whispered, clenching his fists. She will still pay for this. Sunday, Grand Mitchell's house was in a state of sleep when he got out of bed around 6 in the morning. All night he tossed and turned without sleep, read Detective Slayton's short reports, and thought about his wife, who was not at Rosemont at a corporate seminar, as she lied to him, but at the Greenleaf Hotel with her lover Lance. Grand already knew all the key details, but despite the raging rage, he restrained himself. It was vital for him to continue to appear calm and not give Cassandra a reason to jump out of the trap. In the kitchen, he set the coffee to brew and looked thoughtfully out the window where it was getting light. His gaze fell on a photograph of Cassandra standing on the shelf next to the refrigerator. She was smiling cheerfully, hugging Annie on her 13th birthday. Sadly, the old Cassandra seemed to have disappeared forever. The private investigator's reports appeared before my eyes. A photo of Cassandra holding hands with Lance as she left the hotel, and photographs of their feast in one of the Springfield restaurants. Slayton's comments clearly stated that, at Grand's request, he was collecting hard-wired evidence of treason. Closer to noon, Grand heard a car stop at the house. Soon the front door slammed. Cassandra walked in, a fake smile of weariness on her face. "Hello," she drawled, taking off her cloak. She returned. The seminar was so intense. "I'm glad you're home," Grand said evenly. Inside, he felt his skin burning from a caustic cocktail of anger and contempt. But he didn't give himself away either by gesture or voice. "Where's Annie?" "I went to the library with a friend, preparing for tests. We'll be back by lunchtime." "I see." Cassandra put the suitcase against the wall. "I'm tired. I'll take a shower. Then we'll have lunch." Grand nodded and looked away. He knew that the suitcase most likely contained things that smelled of other people's perfumes, and perhaps there were also piquant gifts given to her by her lover. A desire flared up in him to immediately break loose, accuse, and shake everything out on the floor. But at the last moment he restrained himself. "Wait, Grand, a little later. Proceed according to plan." When Cassandra came out of the bathroom, her hair was still damp and pulled back into a messy bun. She was wearing a white t-shirt and sweatpants, a complete contrast to the office elegance that she sported on ordinary days. There was silence at the table, interrupted only by the clatter of cutlery and occasional questions to Annie about her studies. "How were the tests, honey?" Cassandra asked casually. "Okay," Annie responded without looking up. The teenager felt tension between her father and stepmother and acted dryly. Perhaps she guessed that her mother, although not her own, was lying. "Aren't you bored?" Cassandra tried to smile, turning rather to Grand. "Yes, they worked," he answered evasively. "Time flies quickly." Cassandra pursed her lips slightly. She was used to Grand always being more interested and attentive, but now he looked almost indifferent. She expected, perhaps, scenes of jealousy or interrogation, but his calmness hit her nerves much more strongly. After lunch, Cassandra tried to hug Annie and suggest they go for a walk to the store together, but she refused, citing homework. The girl went home, and Grand remained in the kitchen sorting out the dishes. Cassandra approached him from behind. "Listen, Grand, are we okay?" she asked quietly, placing her hand on his shoulder. "I think so," he answered coolly, without turning around. "Why are you asking? You just look so distant." She wanted to add something else, but stopped short. The Grand put down the last plate and said dryly, "There's just a lot to do. We can put off talking. You're tired after the seminar." He turned around, almost brushing her shoulder, and left the kitchen. At that moment, Cassandra felt the ground under her feet begin to shake slightly. But she thought, he's probably depressed or has problems at work. Already on Monday morning, after taking Annie to school, Grand went not to the construction site, but to the office of Beverly Sanders, his family lawyer. This time he came with a folder containing the first results of Slayton's investigation, photographs, brief reports, and printed emails that the detective fished out from Cassandra's hacked email at the request of the client and semi-legal methods, which, however, can be used in some cases. "Good morning, Grand," Beverly greeted him, extending her hand welcomingly. "How is your business going?" Terrible details have been revealed. He did not sit down, but immediately laid the documents on the table. "Here is evidence of her betrayal. Detective Slayton spotted her dating a lover named Lance Hamilton. Photos, videos, their correspondence. Is this enough to ruin her in court?" Beverly sat down, put on her glasses, and began flipping through the folder. Her face remained serious, but professional concentration flashed in her eyes. "Understand, it's unfortunate that this has been confirmed. Okay, let's clarify the details. In Missouri, we have an equitable distribution system that is, in a divorce, property is divided fairly, but not necessarily equally. The court may take into account the behavior of the spouses, including infidelity, if it affected their joint financial situation. So the mere fact of betrayal does not always give me an advantage. Formally, no. But if you prove that Cassandra spent common money on her lover, rented hotels, bought him gifts, or that her infidelity somehow affected your budget, then the court will take this into account. Plus, if it comes to alimony or spousal support, this could tip the scales in your favor. However, you don't have any children together, right? Yes, Annie is my own daughter from my first marriage. Then the issue of custody becomes simpler. Cassandra, by law, cannot claim custody of Annie, but she may try to claim that she has an emotional or maternal connection with the girl, although the chances are slim. Annie won't be on her side anyway. She supports me, she knows that something is wrong. Understand? Then your main battlefield is the division of property, finances, possible alimony for Cassandra, if she proves that she is accustomed to a certain standard of living and needs support. "I won't allow this," there was determination in Grand's voice. "I need the strongest legal position possible. Your task, to behave with restraint, not to show aggression, not to provoke her into statements about domestic violence or psychological pressure. Otherwise, the court may take her side." Grand nodded. He understood that conflicts could cost him his reputation and money if Cassandra decided to make him out to be an angry, aggressive husband. Leaving the office, Grand went to the bank to discuss the possibility of opening a separate account in his name, where he planned to transfer part of the construction company's income. He understood that until the marriage was dissolved, Cassandra could have access to their joint family account. "Mr. Mitchell, would you like to open a personal business account?" The clerk clarified, leafing through the papers. "Exactly. And I will contribute part of the profit that I receive in addition to the base salary as the owner of the company," Grand answered. "I want to divide personal and family funds." This was legal provided that Grand did not hide funds, but simply optimize financial flows. But in the prospect of divorce, such a move gave him more control. Later, at lunchtime, Grand visited Patrick O'Neill, a childhood friend, at an auto repair shop. He was sitting on a toolbox, drinking a Coca-Cola sandwich. "Grundy, you don't look good," Patrick noted. Did something happen? I visited a lawyer. I have a lot of evidence that Cassandra is cheating, but it turns out that the mere fact of cheating does not mean much in Missouri. You need to prove the financial component. Do you mean that she spent your money on her lover? Exactly. Detective Slayton continues to dig. She says there are already checks and statements. She rented hotel rooms from a corporate card to which I regularly transferred money from the family account. This could be a trump card. Fine. Then keep digging. Listen, how is Annie? He's holding up well, but I see that he's worried. She understands everything. Maybe we should distract her, take her somewhere to an amusement park or to a baseball game. Yes, that's a good idea, Gran nodded. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in this mud. Need a breath of air. After talking with his friend, Grand felt a little relieved. But the realization remained inside. The calm will not last forever. There will be a storm soon. A few days later, Grand was preparing dinner when Cassandra suddenly approached him and tried to hug him. This happened for the first time in recent months. In her movements, there was a certain convulsive attempt to regain the lost intimacy, or at least create an appearance. Grand, forgive me for being distant, she began quietly, pressing herself against his back. It was hard for me, all these business trips, stress. I love you, I really do. Do you really love him? He asked with barely noticeable irony, without turning around. Certainly. Why do you say that? He turned, trying to remain calm, and saw in her eyes a plea for recognition. But he also noticed something else, a desperate attempt to hide his confusion. Maybe she sensed that he already knew something. I just felt cold from you for a long time. I'm glad you decided to return to warm relations, he said, imitating his previous naivety. Cassandra nodded nervously. You're not angry that I'm late so often, are you? No, because work is good. Is it true? Otherwise, I was afraid that you wouldn't understand everything correctly. Her phrases sounded false, but Grand pretended not to notice anything. At the same time, inside he was grinding his teeth in disgust. Now that he knew all the details of her infidelities, the words, "I love you," in her mouth were tantamount to being stabbed with a knife. Later, while watching TV as a family, Annie walked out of the room and glanced at her parents, who were sitting side by side. She seemed to feel a contradiction between the picture of a cozy family and the tension that was in the air. Dad, Mom, I'll go to Caroline. We're preparing a joint project on biology, she said. Of course, go, honey, Gran nodded. Be home by 10. Fine. When the door closed behind the girl, Cassandra took Gran's hand. Grand, you feel like everything is. Not the same as before. Yes, I feel it. He removed his hand. Can we talk frankly? What are you talking about? She tensed. About us. Don't you think it's time to stop pretending? For a second, Cassandra sat as if she had been slashed with a razor. Then she tried to make her voice calm. I'm not pretending, I really want to make things right. Then explain how it happens that you leave for seminars and come back covered in foreign smells and with a nervous smile. At this second, Cassandra turned pale. What foreign smell? What are you talking about? About the fact that perhaps you have someone else. I don't want to accuse anyone without reason, he added pointedly, but I get the feeling that you are insincere. She suddenly raised her chin. This is absurd. I don't have any other man. I don't know where you got this from. Maybe you need to relax and stop looking everywhere for cheating. Aggressive bewilderment flashed in Cassandra's eyes, but Grand also noticed fear in this look. He decided not to continue, so as not to completely scare her away and not give her a reason to accuse himself of pressure or violence. Fine. I believe you, he said quietly, getting up from the sofa. I'll go for a walk. I'll breathe some air. He threw on his jacket and walked out the door. I left it in the living room. Cassandra sat clenching her fists and felt that the trust in their family was cracking at the seams. But she probably still hoped to get out. The next day, Grand received an urgent call from Slayton. Mr. Mitchell, I think you should know. We found out the identity of the lover in more detail. Lance Hamilton is a man who recently opened an investment company in Springfield. Apparently, he sponsors some dental projects, and Cassandra often travels to see him for work. Great, Slayton. Is there anything new we can use in court? We pulled up bank statements. Lance transferred money directly into Cassandra's account, and she used family funds to meet with him, including paying for expensive gifts for herself like underwear, jewelry, and, judging by indirect evidence, for him too. I have proof of payments from a family account in his name for business advice. Grand squeezed the phone. Business consultations were clearly a fiction, a cover for her adultery. Every dollar he spent on lies made him more determined to grind this family life into dust, but to do it in a smart way, without loss to himself and Annie. The situation developed unexpectedly when Gran decided to stop by the dental clinic where Cassandra worked. Officially, to consult about her daughter's future treatment, Annie wanted to get braces. He walked into the reception and saw Cassandra standing with a bored look at the counter, peering at some papers. A tall man in an expensive suit stood next to her. Grand instantly guessed Lance from Slayton's descriptions and photographs. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" One of the assistants turned to Grand, noticing the visitor. "I'm looking for Mrs. Cassandra Mitchell. I want to make an appointment for my daughter for a consultation," he answered, trying to speak calmly. Cassandra looked up, and a look of shock flashed across her face. Lance turned around, and his eyes met with Grand's. For a moment, there was deathly silence in the room. "Oh, Grand," Cassandra said tensely, "I didn't think you'd come today. I wanted to clarify how to sign Annie up for braces." Grand came closer, not taking his eyes off Lance. He, noticeably embarrassed, extended his hand. "Hello, I'm Lance Hamilton, an investor in this clinic. And you, apparently, are Cassandra's husband." "Yes, that's right," Grand answered briefly and did not shake the outstretched hand. Tension rang in the air. The assistant, seeing the strange scene, quietly stepped aside. Cassandra hurried to put the papers in the folder and, smiling uncertainty, said, "Now I will free myself and help you, Grand. Lance, I'll call you about the paperwork next week, okay?" "Of course," Lance said, glancing over at Grand. "Nice to meet you." He headed towards the exit, and Grand stood motionless, crossing his arms over his chest. When Lance disappeared behind the glass door, Cassandra turned away, as if trying to do some paperwork, but the trembling in her fingers was noticeable. "So this is your sponsor for the clinic?" Grand asked quietly, taking a step towards the counter. "Yes, one of our partners," she answered, trying to speak evenly. "He funds the expansion of dental services." Grand didn't say anything. He just grinned, looking straight into her eyes. "Well, of course," he muttered, making it clear that he didn't believe it one bit. "Regarding Annie's appointment, I'll call and make an appointment through the administrator. See you at home, dear." He turned and walked out, leaving Cassandra alone with her thoughts. Fear was raging inside her because she felt that Grand was no longer that naive husband who could be bullied. That same evening, Grand received from the detective a complete package of photographs, screenshots of correspondence, checks, electronic receipts, and bank statements. When Annie went to bed, he sorted everything into folders and put it in the safe. Now he had enough evidence to instantly file for divorce if he wanted, presenting evidence to the judicial authority. But he had not yet signed the statement of claim. He was looking for an opportune moment for his strike. By midnight, when Cassandra finally returned from somewhere, supposedly at a meeting with the head physician of the clinic, Grand was sitting in the darkened living room. One lamp burned near the fireplace, creating the effect of a small spotlight. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked, taking off her coat. "I was waiting for you." The Grand looked up. "We need to talk. Now." Cassandra looked around and noticed an unusual sternness in his voice. She came closer and sat down on the sofa opposite. "Fine. Speak. Do you know what financial fraud in marriage is?" he asked, tilting his head to the side. "What? Some strange questions. No, I don't know. This is when one of the spouses uses family money secretly from the other for personal needs that do not correspond to the interests of the family. For example, paying for hotels for a lover and other pleasures." Cassandra's face turned ashen gray. Grand, what kind of nonsense are you talking about? You don't have to pretend. I know everything. Lance, your trips, bills, gifts. I don't need to listen to any more of your dental seminar excuses. Cassandra took a deep breath, seeing that he understood everything, and trying to figure out how to get out of it. You, she swallowed, stuttering. Have you hired a detective? This is illegal. You invaded my privacy. Personal life? We are officially married. Our finances are shared, and it was perfectly legal for the detective to follow you in public places. But your behavior can hardly be called legal. He straightened up, like a judge reading out a verdict. I can file for divorce tomorrow and present all the evidence in court. Cassandra frowned, trying to regain her confidence. What about the court? The court will not do anything. It is not a crime to love another person. To love, he snorted mockingly. In Missouri, of course, just cheating doesn't allow me to take you and leave you with nothing. But if it is proven that you embezzled money to spend it on relationships on the side, this is already a matter of wasting joint funds. The court will not be happy. It wasn't your money, it was mine, she shouted, losing her cool. I have a salary, I can manage it myself. Yes, but statements from our family accounts say otherwise. Plus a corporate card that we issued in your name to conveniently pay general expenses. Do you remember? She closed her eyes. The picture became increasingly bleak for her. What do you want, Grand? She whispered, realizing that it was useless to deny. I want honesty and justice. I'm tired of living a lie. You lied to me, betrayed me, and we both know that our marriage is dead. Do you want to file for divorce? Want, and I will definitely give it to you. But you have a choice. Try to get bogged down in a dirty lawsuit with the risk of being left with nothing, or voluntarily sign an agreement to divorce and the conditions that I will put forward. Cassandra knew he was keeping her trapped. For so many years, she considered Grand a simpleton, not suspecting his ability for cold calculation. Anger and fear tore her heart. Finally, she spoke, almost hissing. And what are these conditions? I do not claim your personal salary and property that you acquired before marriage, but the house and part of the business belong to me, and I will not allow you to dispute this in court. Also, there will be no alimony for you, and stay away from Annie. But I helped raise her. She's old enough to decide if she wants to have contact with you when this is all over. Cassandra clenched her fists. Tears flowed from her eyes. You're disgusting. I know, but I didn't start this game. The next morning, Grand woke Annie up early and asked her to go down to the living room. The girl, noticing that her father's voice sounded serious, immediately realized that something had happened. Dad, is everything okay? She asked, sitting down on the sofa. Baby, we need to talk about Cassandra, about our future. For a moment, Annie glanced over the face of her stepmother, who sat to the side with puffy eyes. The situation was extremely tense. You saw that Cassandra and I were going through a crisis? Grand began quietly. Yes, sure. Now I have to say that we are getting a divorce. The reason is her betrayal. I don't want to go into dirty details, but she cheated on me with another man, and she lied for a very long time. Annie turned pale. Cassandra looked away. Mom. Well, Cassandra, is it true? Annie's voice broke. Annie, Cassandra couldn't find the words. She tried to approach the girl, but she backed away. So that means you've been lying all this time. Annie almost shouted, and tears splashed down her cheeks. Grand clenched his fists, trying to control himself. He wanted to protect his daughter from this dirt, but it was too late. The truth was revealed. Annie, you don't need to hear all this right now, he said more softly. I understand it hurts. But why? Annie sobbed, looking at Cassandra. I believed you. I thought you loved us. Cassandra burst into tears and, covering her face with her hands, ran out of the living room. At that moment, Grand hugged his daughter. I'm sorry you had to go through that, honey, but I don't want any more lies. Annie clung to her father, shaken by sobs. Thank you for telling the truth. Later that day, in the late afternoon, Gran discovered Cassandra in their bedroom. She rushed around the room with her suitcase, nervously throwing clothes and cosmetics into it. She probably decided to go to Lance or her friend. "Where are you going?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm leaving," she answered in a broken voice, without raising her head. "I think it's better than living under one roof. I need time to think about everything." "Fine, I won't detain you. I have already warned the lawyer that you will receive divorce papers soon." Cassandra threw the last of her things into the suitcase and slammed it shut. "You really hate me that much now, don't you?" "I don't hate you," he said after a pause. "I'm disgusted by what you did. But in general, I don't care anymore. The main thing is I want to protect my daughter. Be that as it may, I was your wife. We shared a bed, and then you shared a bed with someone else," he snapped harshly. "Leave, and call my lawyer when it's time to sign the papers." She wanted to answer, but her pride did not allow her to get involved in a meaningless argument. Tears flowed freely, but Gran saw that these were tears not only of remorse, but also of anger that she had ultimately lost. He walked away without a word, letting her through to the exit. Cassandra pulled her suitcase out of the house, got into her car, and, through the oppressive silence, drove away. Shortly after her departure, Patrick arrived at the house, having called in advance and learned about the development of events. Seeing the gloomy expression on Gran's face, he did not ask unnecessary questions. They moved a little towards the yard and stood near the pickup truck. It started to rain. "So, is it over?" Patrick asked softly. "Not yet. There will be a difficult divorce procedure and division of property. But she left. I can finally breathe without feeling sickeningly angry every day." "How's Annie?" "Crying. But I talked to her and explained the situation. I think we can handle it." Patrick sighed. "Well done for not stooping to scandals and violence." He acted smart. "Yes, but I feel squeezed. It's like I've lost faith in people." "You just lost faith in Cassandra," Patrick corrected, placing his hand on his friend's shoulder. "But this does not mean that there are no honest women. You just got such a person." "Perhaps," Gran nodded. "Right now my job is to quickly settle the divorce and protect Annie." The next day, Gran visited Beverly Sanders again. He explained that Cassandra packed her things and left, that there was enough evidence to prove in detail her infidelity and waste of public funds. Beverly agreed to file a petition for divorce, attaching the collected materials. "If Cassandra is reasonable," Beverly said, "we can reach an agreement without a big scandal. She will sign the papers and leave with what she has. What if not? Then there will be a full-fledged trial, during which I will present evidence. And the court will most likely take your side in the matter of finances." Grand understood that Cassandra would have to choose, either a tough confrontation where all her sins would emerge publicly, or a relatively peaceful outcome where she would retain at least part of her reputation and personal money. Several days passed. Cassandra did not appear at home. Annie more or less calmed down and tried not to think about what had happened, delving into her studies. The Grand still did not sleep completely peacefully at night, but there was no longer that hellish pain in his soul. Instead, there is a tough inner core and determination to move forward. He sat on the porch of the house, watching the sun set over the roofs of the neighboring houses. He remembered the times when he had no idea about cheating, when he believed in the ideal marriage. Now it all fell apart, but he caught himself thinking that he also felt liberation. The pain and resentment did not disappear, but became an impetus for him to see who was really standing next to him, and who was just taking advantage of him. The phone vibrated in my pocket. "Message from Slayton. Cassandra met with your lawyer. It seems that she is ready for a settlement agreement. Stop my services for now." Gran sighed and typed in an answer. "Yes, that's enough. Thank you." This means that Cassandra chose the path of compromise, and this meant that the long-running trial would probably not take place. He would get a divorce on his own terms. The house, business, full custody of Annie will remain with him, and Cassandra will leave without noise. Everything he had worked for, collected evidence, hired a detective, and controlled his anger was now almost achieved. At that moment, Annie came out onto the porch. "Dad, are you okay?" "Quite." He smiled at her softer than he had smiled at her in months. "You know, for some reason my soul felt lighter." "I'm glad. You deserve to be truly loved. Not like SHH." Grand hugged his daughter. "We can handle it. I promise." A few days after Cassandra abandoned the house and Grand in tears and anger, there was a strange calm. Grand Mitchell woke up early in January morning. There was slippery ice outside the window and a small snowstorm was blowing. The past week passed as if in a dream. After the climax in the house, when Cassandra packed her bags and left, Grand and his 15-year-old daughter Annie found themselves in an unusual emptiness. In Cassandra's place, there were empty shelves in the closets. Her usual little things on the dressing table had disappeared, and her favorite bright red coat was no longer hanging on the hanger by the front door. Usually in January, the weather in Forge River was changeable, either a slight thaw or a sharp cold snap. For Grand, the weather symbolized his own state. Periodically warm waves of relief rolled in that this unbearable lie had been revealed, and he was finally on the path to liberation from betrayal, but behind them came the painful awareness of the loss of illusion. He still invested some part of himself in his marriage with Cassandra. He believed that they could build happiness together. Feeling that Annie had already woken up and left the room, he got out of bed and pulled on a warm jacket. My daughter was sitting near the kitchen table, looking thoughtfully into a mug of cooling tea. There were shadows under her eyes. She herself did not sleep at night, comprehending everything that had happened. "Good morning, Dad," she smiled weakly. "Hello, honey. How are you feeling?" Grand patted her on the shoulder. "Maybe a little better than yesterday, but still empty." "I understand." He put the kettle on, wondering whether to talk about the successes that have already been achieved in the legal field. However, he decided that Annie needed to at least know what was happening now. "I'm meeting Beverly again today. We will be filing final papers with the divorce court." "Dad, I had no doubt that you would do this," Annie sighed, looking ahead. "I'm sorry it ended like this, and I don't want to see Cassandra anymore." "Understand, but she will probably try to call and write for some time." "Yes, but I don't want anything myself. I just want to forget." Annie ran her hand through her hair, as if trying to brush away the memories. Graham thought that perhaps they both could use a consultation with a psychologist. Moreover, Annie is a teenager, and there are so many mental traumas. The death of her own mother Laura several years ago, now the betrayal of her father's second wife. He didn't want his daughter to withdraw into herself and start blaming the whole world. But for now, I decided not to raise this topic. It's still too fresh and painful. At 10 in the morning, as scheduled, Grand walked into the familiar office of Beverly Sanders. His heart sank slightly. This place became for him the starting point for a harsh collision with legal reality. The lawyer met him, as always, impeccably dressed in a business suit, with her hair pulled back into a neat bun. "Good morning, Grand. Come in." She nodded to him. "Hello, Bev. Anything new?" He sat down on the chair in front of her desk, feeling a slight trembling in his fingertips. "Yes, I have information from Cassandra's lawyer, a certain Mr. Todd Blaine. It looks like she finally agreed to go to the settlement we talked about, but they want to clarify some points." "Which ones exactly?" Grand frowned. "Firstly, she seems to agree not to claim the house and the main capital of your business if—" Beverly paused, leafing through the papers. "If you pay her a small, one-time compensation for the years of marriage." "And how much does she estimate this compensation?" The Grand felt irritation boiling inside again. $20,000. "Damn," he cursed, squeezing the armrests of his chair tightly. "She already took a lot out of our family, spending the common money on love trips, expensive things." "Understand. But if you look at it from the side of the court, she was your wife for 5 years, including, apparently, leading everyday life and participating in the life of her daughter. If we try to refuse her completely, she may start a lengthy trial, present her arguments, and present herself as a victim." "Okay," Grand said, trying to speak evenly. I'll take 20,000, although it's unpleasant. Second point, she wants to keep the joint car, the same Toyota that you took out on credit. But the loan is almost paid off. There are literally a couple of payments left. Okay, he takes the Toyota, and that's it. No alimony or any other payments for you. Grand looked into Beverly's eyes. Do I understand correctly? Right. She also officially renounces her claims to your construction company and even to the shares that were acquired jointly. Beverly turned the documents, showing the clause in the agreement. She is left with personal savings, a car, plus compensation. Okay, Grand repeated, exhaling. No matter how disgusting it may be, agreeing to the amount and giving the car is still better than dragging out the litigation for another 6 months. One more thing. We have a 30-day period after filing for divorce before a court in Missouri can finally approve the dissolution of the marriage. During this time, theoretically, the parties can withdraw the claim and reconsider the terms. But if you both agree and do not change the conditions, then a month after submission, everything will become final. Grand nodded, rubbing his temples. It's good that Missouri doesn't have an overly long mandatory separation like some states, but even a month seemed like an eternity. He would like to get rid of this marriage immediately. Well, he looked up at the lawyer. Let's start the process. I'm ready to sign these papers. Great. I'm sure, given our evidence, this will be the best outcome. Grand. Beverly smiled reassuringly. After lunch, Grand drove to a construction site where work continued on upgrading warehouse space for a local trading company. The guys from the brigade were busy at the concrete wall, preparing it for painting. Assistant Oliver, the same young man, diligent and serious, saw Grand and ran out to meet him. Mr. Mitchell, is everything okay? He asked. You've been skipping morning briefings a lot lately. Sorry, Ollie, personal matters, Grand answered briefly, smiling awkwardly. But everything is under control. How is work going? We have already poured a new screed. We are waiting for it to dry. Then we will start sanding. Everything is on schedule. The Grand patted the young man on the shoulder. Well done. You're good at keeping everything under control. Walking through the construction site, he enjoyed the smell of wood, paint, and cement. Despite the anxiety about the divorce, a feeling of stability suddenly appeared in my soul. The business was not collapsing. The workers continued to work. Orders were coming. He will not lose his life's work because of Cassandra's treachery. The only one he looked for was Patrick O'Neill, his longtime friend and auto repair shop owner, who sometimes came to the sites to help repair construction equipment. But today Patrick was nowhere to be seen. Grand dialed his number. Hey, Patrick, where did you go? Hello, Grundy. Sorry, I'm busy right now. I have new clients with serious problems in the engine. Let's meet in the evening. Come on, I'll come. We need to talk. There is news about the divorce. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Grand heard his cell phone ring. The number was unfamiliar. Hello, Grand Mitchell is listening. Hi, there was tension in his voice. This is Lance Hamilton. Grand almost dropped the phone. Lance, Cassandra's lover. Why is he calling? Yes, I'm listening, Grand said after a short pause, trying to sound as cold as possible. Can we meet? There is a matter that I would like to talk about face to face. For what? Grand had difficulty restraining his outburst of aggression. Do you think we have anything to talk about? I understand your emotions, but believe me, there is something important that concerns. He paused, financial issues and further proceedings. The fact is that I have encountered some problems, and perhaps it would be more beneficial for both of us to discuss everything without involving unnecessary people. The Grand doubted, but curiosity got the better of him. Fine. Where and when? Let's go to the Highway Diner on the outskirts of the city today at 6 o'clock in the evening. It's quiet and few people know this place, Lance suggested. I'll think about it, Grand answered dryly and dropped the call. The idea of meeting the man who ruined his marriage was disgusting, but what if Lance held the key to making Grand's case even more secure in court, or some kind of dirt on Cassandra? After thinking, Grand decided that it was worth the risk. He called Patrick and said, "Friend, sorry, I won't be able to come to you on time." Here, a strange conversation arose. "What kind of conversation?" "Lance Hamilton wants to see me." "Yours? Be careful, Grundy. Who knows what's on his mind?" "I'm careful," Grand lowered his voice. "Perhaps this is even a useful thing for me. I'll let you know when I'm free." That's what we agreed on. At 6 in the evening, Grand drove up to the Highway Diner, an inconspicuous roadside establishment that is usually quiet in the evenings. Inside, there was a smell of fried onions and smoke from the grill, and a plump, middle-aged woman stood behind the counter, pouring coffee into cheap ceramic mugs. There were few visitors, 2 truck drivers, and some couples at the farm table. Lance sat in the corner, his cap pulled down over his face, as if he was afraid of being recognized. The Grand, straightening his shoulders, walked up to his table and sat down opposite him without greeting. "Thank you for coming," Lance said quietly, taking off his cap. "Speak quickly." "I'm not eager to sit here for a long time," Grand answered, looking without blinking at his wife's kind friend. Now, in the light of the lamp, Grand noticed that Lance did not look as confident and sleek as before. There were bags under his eyes and his cheekbones were a little sunken. "Cassandra and I broke up," Lance admitted. "Apparently, she now blames me for everything being revealed." "Marvelous. Are you expecting me to feel sorry for you?" Grand said dryly. "No, no, of course not." Lance clasped his fingers. "I know you hate me, but let me tell you, I have problems at work. The investment company is under investigation. Looks like we're going to have legal claims due to improper paperwork. And what do I have to do with it? The thing is that I discovered Cassandra at some moments really pulled off strange schemes. She partially used my accounts and her corporate card to transfer money to an unknown destination. I thought it was payment for some needs of the clinic, but now I see she sponsored someone else or perhaps transferred funds to offshore accounts." Grand frowned. "So you want to say that Cassandra not only spent money on you too, but also poured it somewhere else, and perhaps deceived you too?" "Looks like it," Lance nodded, looking down. "And if this comes to light, my company could get into even more trouble. I'm facing a civil lawsuit for fraud, and I don't want to go to jail because of her greed or machinations." Grand looked at him silently for some time, digesting the information. At first, he felt an angry satisfaction. "Here's your payback for everything, Lance." But then I wondered, how will this affect my divorce case? "What do you need from me?" Grand finally asked. "I need you to help. Basically, to speak up in court if it comes down to it and confirm that Cassandra was not authorized to use the family account for such transfers." Lance's voice was pleading. "Then I can prove that this was not my initiative, and perhaps I'll get away with it." "And what will I get for this?" "I can provide you with a number of documents correspondence with Cassandra, bank statements, which show that she withdrew money not only to our joint numbers and purchases, but also somewhere else. These materials can be very useful in your divorce proceedings when the court will decide whether she should receive some kind of compensation, alimony, or something else. This proves her fraud on an especially large scale." Grand narrowed his eyes, realizing that if he had such evidence, Cassandra risked being left with literally nothing. The settlement she proposes can be used as a humane solution, and if she decides to complicate the process, he can file a serious claim against her for fraud and embezzlement. That is, this will become insurance for him. "Well, I'm interested," Grand said in an undertone, clasping his fingers on the table. "Great. Then we both win. You will testify that Cassandra spent money without your consent, including using a corporate card, and in return, I will give you all the evidence of her fraud. I hope you understand that I'm not doing this for your benefit," Grand added harshly. "I want her not to be able to deceive me in court again." "I understand," Lance sighed heavily. "Everything is going to hell for me anyway. I don't know if I'll come out of this business intact, but it's better than being put on trial for fraud that I myself did not approve of." They exchanged lawyer numbers, agreed that Lance would send a copy of documents, and excerpts from correspondence in the coming days, and Grand would, if possible, confirm in his explanatory note to the court that Cassandra had no right to act on behalf of their family in financial transactions of this kind. As Grand stood up to leave, he turned to Lance. "And one last thing. Know this, I am not going to forgive you, and there will be no friendship between us." "I understand," Lance replied, lowering his head. Grand left the diner, feeling the cold wind blow away the remnants of pity for Cassandra. It looks like she managed to deceive not only him. Returning home around 8 in the evening, Grand found Annie sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, watching videos about new musical groups on his smartphone. She looked focused, but not as depressed as in the morning. "Hey, Dad," she called, seeing him enter the living room. "Hello, honey. Everything is fine?" "I think so. I was looking for a couple of songs for a school project. We're doing a presentation about 90s music. Would you like to listen?" Grand smiled. "Annie is probably just trying to distract herself somehow." "With pleasure." And while the rhythms of some old tracks were playing in the headphones, Grand sat down next to him, and they talked a little about what they would do on the weekend. Despite the depressing events, a special warmth remained between father and daughter. Annie asked a question. "Dad, I was thinking, maybe we can go to Mom's grave. I haven't been there for a long time, but now I feel like I need to remember how it was with her, when everything was honest and without betrayal." Hearing this, Grand realized that in her voice there was a desire to find some kind of moral support in the image of Laura's late mother. He nodded. "Yes, sure. We'll go tomorrow." Thus ended this long day, full of new discoveries, deals, and moral compromises. Grand felt that he was inevitably moving towards a final break with the past, and increasingly understood how deeply Cassandra was immersed in the intricacies of lies. Perhaps soon all this will dot the I's and allow him and his daughter to be free. The next morning, Grand and Annie got ready to set off. The grave of Laura, Grand's first wife and Annie's birth mother, was in an old cemetery about a half-hour's drive east of Forge River, near a small church with a pointed bell tower. Once upon a time, Grand specially bought a plot for the family next to a beautiful oak tree in order to honor Laura's memory in a quiet place under the canopy of trees. The weather again decided to show its changeable character. It suddenly became warmer. The snow began to melt, forming puddles. The gray sky enveloped the light in a dull veil. We drove in silence. Annie looked out the window of the pickup truck. Grand occasionally glanced at the weather map on the dashboard. They left the car at the cemetery gates and walked slowly along the old paths, among the moss-covered tombstones. Epitaphs with dates, crosses, well-groomed and abandoned areas, all this, as always, brought thoughts back to the frailty of life. At Laura's grave, Grand saw a familiar stone, gray granite, on which her name, years of life, and a short inscription, beloved wife and mother, were engraved. He ordered this epitaph himself. "Hello, Mom," Annie said quietly, squatting down near the monument and removing dry twigs. "Sorry I haven't come for a long time." Grand stood nearby, holding back the lump in his throat. Memories of Laura overwhelmed him. They got married at 23 and lived together for almost 10. Laura died in a car accident when Annie was just 9. A terrible blow of fate that unsettled Grand for a long time. Memories were mixed with worries about the current crisis. "Dad, do you remember how she always laughed at our stupid jokes?" Annie smiled quietly through her tears, running her hand over the tombstone. "Yes, sure. She actually knew how to laugh. Even on the grayest days," Grand answered, trying to keep his voice from trembling. They were silent for several minutes. Annie cried quietly, as if throwing out the accumulated pain, not only from the loss of her mother, but also from the betrayal of Cassandra, whom she, in fact, also considered a close person. "Mom, I really miss you. Dad probably does too, although he doesn't show it every day. You would be so angry with us if you knew that we were living in such a drama," Annie said, biting her lip. Grand squatted down next to him and hugged his daughter. I clearly felt her trembling from tears. "I'm sorry that I can't always protect you from life's blows," he said. "But you know, your mom would be proud of you. because you are strong and honest. It took them another 20 minutes to collect their thoughts, adjust the flowers at the grave. Grand brought a bouquet of white lilies that Laura loved and slowly moved back to the car. There was a residue in my soul, but as often happens after tears, a certain lightness appeared. Annie herself began to tell her father about school affairs, about how they were preparing for the spring concert, and Grand felt that this visit really helped her throw out the painful things. Returning to the car, Grand checked his phone. I saw that several emails had arrived. In particular, one from Lance Hamilton with attached files. I hope he didn't lie, Grand thought as he opened the message. Inside are several screenshots of Cassandra's correspondence with unknown contacts, where the amounts and purpose of payments were discussed. There were PDF files with bank transactions. In many places, figures appeared that clearly exceeded the usual expenses for trips and gifts that Cassandra made for herself and Lance. Amounts marked transfer to a private consultant in Texas and some Seaside Holdings LLC with an address in Florida. What the hell, he cursed quietly, looking at the tables. In one of the letters, Cassandra literally reprimanded Lance. We need to have time to transfer the balance before Grand suspects anything. I promise to close all the tales in the clinic. You know I'm not interested in unnecessary questions. The main thing is that we are safe. The date of the correspondence was 4 months ago, just before the beginning of her frequent delays. Dad, what's there? Annie asked, noticing how he frowned at the screen with his finger. Yes, just something for work. He did not tell his daughter that these were new revealing materials against Cassandra. I got into the car and started the engine. We drove back, and Grand thought about how best to use the new data. Apparently, Cassandra was not only having a personal affair, perhaps there were some financial frauds at the dental clinic where she worked. But should we admit this publicly or leave it in the stash in order to put pressure on her if she suddenly decides to violate the terms? After a visit to the cemetery and lunch at a roadside cafe at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Grand and Annie drove up to his house, and he saw that there was a car standing by the porch that he knew very well, a Toyota, registered for 2, but which Cassandra had taken in recent days. His heart sank. What is she doing here? Damn it, Annie, stay in the car, please, he said, leaving. But Dad, no, I'll talk about myself. Then I'll call you if necessary. Grand's eyes flashed lightning. Cassandra stood near the door, wrapped in a black coat, fiddling with her gloves. Seeing Grand, she straightened up. I knocked, but you weren't there. I decided to wait. Why did you suddenly decide to return to my house? Grand asked coldly, approaching. We need to talk. I have problems. Serious ones. My job. I was fired from the clinic. They say that I allegedly violated financial discipline, and they have evidence. The Grand flushed in his soul. Apparently, after Cassandra's departure, her superiors actually studied the accounts and discovered inconsistencies. Or maybe Lance had a hand in it. Now she came running for help. So what? What do I have to do with it? Grand, squinting, looked at her. Understand, I may be left without funds. I need to live somehow, Cassandra shouted. And I don't want to spoil the relationship and go to court with charges against you. What other charges? Grand crossed his arms over his chest. I could say that you forced me to sign papers, that you threatened, that you behaved aggressively. Understand. There was a hysterical note in her voice, but Grand caught the falseness. Are you threatening me with false accusations? His voice rang out like steel, although everything was boiling inside. It seemed to me that we had already signed a settlement agreement. I haven't put the final signature yet. My lawyer said I have 30 days to change my mind. That's it, thought Grand, gritting his teeth. So she's trying to blackmail him now to get more money. Okay, tell me straight. What do you want? Increase the amount. Give me at least $35,000, and I will remove my claims and inform the lawyer that I agreed to divorce without trials. Or, I'll go to court with a fake story that you suppressed me morally, almost beat me. Plus, you can say that Annie insulted me, that we have dangerous conditions in the house. The judge may turn his back on you. In response, Grand barely restrained himself from raising his voice. It seemed to him that he was about to explode with indignation. We must remember, no harsh actions. She may later say that I am aggressive, he reminded himself. You're completely crazy, Cassandra, he said quietly, without moving from his place. I have enough evidence of your betrayal, your machinations, your threats. Do you want me to take this all to court? Don't bluff. I have nothing to take, she raised her voice, glancing past Grand to the pickup truck where Annie was sitting. Or do you think that some detective there filmed everything? The court does not always take such photographs seriously, but the court considers allegations of emotional abuse. Yes, and you have a cannon-like snout. Remember how you once raised your voice at me. At that moment, steps were quietly heard behind Grand. Annie got out of the car and seemed to have heard everything. The girl approached them. Mom. Cassandra, stop lying. Annie looked at her with contempt and pain. You were our dear person. Why are you now lying and blackmailing your father? Annie, you don't know the whole truth. Your father is not such a saint. Don't you dare, the girl shouted. You apparently still think that we are afraid of you. No, we know what you're capable of. Just go away. Cassandra rushed forward as if she wanted to grab the girl by the hand, but Grand stood firmly between them, not touching his wife, but only shielding Annie with his back. Please keep your distance, he said, trying to sound calm. Otherwise, I'll call the police right away. This is already crossing all boundaries. Cassandra sighed in frustration, feeling that her attempt to put pressure led to nothing. Then I'll see you in court. I hope you're ready for a long fight, Grand. She turned around and quickly walked towards her Toyota. She slammed the door and, giving the gas, sped away. The tires squealed, leaving a black mark on the road. Annie burst into tears. Grand hugged her, feeling the growing horror inside. Will she really go to court, pretending to be a victim? But then he remembered all the evidence he had, plus new materials from Lance. Just try, he thought, deciding that he would see the matter through to the end and not let her destroy their peace. After taking his daughter into the house and calming her down, Grand immediately called Beverly. Listen, I have something new here. Cassandra said that she could revoke the agreement and would go to court with false accusations. Damn, Beverly breathed. This is, of course, unpleasant, but do not panic. If you have enough evidence of her infidelity, embezzlement, and even testimony, believe me, the court is unlikely to side with her on unfounded charges. What if she can provide some kind of linden? Will he attract his friends, or will he make a forgery? Such things also happened. But in most cases, judges are not so naive as to believe one side without specific facts, especially if the other side provides counter-evidence. We'll still win. In addition, you have always remained calm. You have not had a single episode of arrest or complaints. Understood. But be prepared that she may delay the process. Then this nightmare will last not a month, but longer. Grand nodded gloomily, although Beverly did not see him. Then he clenched his fist. Thank you, Bev. I won't back down. Night fell on the Forge River. Annie, who cried after meeting Cassandra, still fell asleep by midnight. Grand sat quietly at the kitchen table, fiddling with his phone in his hands. He thought about calling Patrick, but didn't want to disturb his friend late at night. The window reflected his own tired image with graying temples and pursed lips. The last months have turned his life into chaos, but at the same time they have taught him a lot. Once naive and very trusting, Grand now felt a core within himself. I won't let her destroy my family. No way, the thought flashed. He opened his laptop to look again at the documents Lance had sent. The more he studied them, the more he realized that Cassandra had gotten involved in some outright criminal schemes. If she really resorts to cruel methods, I can file a civil lawsuit against her for fraud, Grand mused coldly. He was no longer afraid of the possible consequences. All that remains is to mentally prepare yourself and your daughter for the fact that difficult court hearings, dirty accusations, and interrogations may await them in the coming weeks or months. The light of the table lamp was reflected in the glass surface of the table, and Grand suddenly caught himself thinking, "How tired I am of this darkness. I want it all to be over and for us to move on with our lives without her shadow." Outside, the wind shook the bare branches of the trees. Tomorrow will be a new day in which we will get even closer to the denouement. And Grand Mitchell is ready. About a week has passed since the day Cassandra tried to blackmail Grand at the door of his house. 7 days of relative calm. She did not come, did not call, did not send new threats. Grand sincerely hoped that she had cooled down and decided to simply sign the settlement agreement. But the illusions were dispelled when he found a subpoena in his mailbox. Signed, "The Circuit Court of Greene County, Missouri, notifies Mr. Grand Mitchell," followed by a date for a preliminary hearing. There was exactly a month left until the appointed day. Preliminary hearing. Grand frowned, leafing through the document. So she has officially filed a counterclaim or objection to the divorce. It turned out that Cassandra had indeed withdrawn her signature on the agreement, deciding to go through formal proceedings and demand fair conditions, citing mental suffering and emotional pressure from her husband. Beverly, having studied the documents, explained, "Now we will have several meetings where each side will present its arguments. If we don't agree on anything, the court will make a decision itself." "Damn," Grand breathed. "Can't we put further pressure on her by presenting that folder with evidence?" "We can, but usually this is done directly at the hearing or during the discovery, the procedure for disclosing evidence. We will certainly indicate that we have the materials. Perhaps her lawyer will try to agree to a deal before the main hearing. So, at least 2 months of hell await me?" Grand asked, looking at the ceiling. "Something like that. After all, the court in Missouri, even in the absence of children from the marriage, does not always quickly decide everything. Plus, you understand, Cassandra will make false accusations. This will take a while." Grand nodded, trying to maintain his composure. He wanted to curse, but he understood. Control yourself. The main thing is that he has facts about her fraud. On Beverly's advice, Grand began to consider scheduling Annie for counseling. The girl is no longer at the age where she can be led by the hand, but the teenager needs support. And perhaps, in court, it will be necessary to show how Cassandra's betrayal affected the moral state of the child. He spoke to the school's principal, Mr. Holmes, who kept records of psychological services for students. "Mr. Mitchell, we have a school psychologist, Miss Langley. Very good specialist," Holmes suggested. "Will it be confidential enough? I don't want to make our family drama public. School psychologists adhere to an ethic of confidentiality, unless the child himself is in danger. But in this case, everything will remain between them if Annie herself does not want to share." Grand discussed this with his daughter. Annie was wary of the idea at first. "Dad, I don't want to tell strangers how I feel." "I understand," he said, trying to speak softly, "but it might help you sort through your emotions. In addition, if the situation with the court becomes intense, we need you to feel more confident and understand that you are okay, that you are not to blame for anything." "Well, maybe," Annie thought for a moment, then sighed. "Okay, I'll try, but I can't promise that I will speak openly if I feel awkward." "It's your choice, I won't push," Grand smiled. Grand spent the weeks remaining before the preliminary hearing in close contact with Beverly. They collected all the evidence from photographs taken by Detective Slayton to documents that Lance sent. Slayton agreed to act as a witness if necessary. Lance could also be called, although Grand had antipathy towards him. He understood that his testimony could help. "We will demonstrate that Cassandra acted in bad faith, spent family money, and, moreover, made fraudulent transfers," Beverly said. "This will cancel out any attempts she might make to make you look bad." "Yes, but she could have already prepared some false witnesses." Grand was afraid. "Let him try. In comparison to real evidence, supported by bank statements and detective information, fake witnesses look pale." Beverly was calm, and Grand admired her composure. During these same days, Grand regularly saw his friend Patrick. He helped him complete the current construction project. He advised him on the purchase of new generators, sometimes visited the sites, and in the evening they briefly talked about personal matters. "Grundy, how are you holding up?" Patrick asked one day when they went out for a smoke break near the hangar. "Tight. But I've already gotten used to the fact that this is my cross. I will endure until the end of the trial. The main thing is, don't give her a reason to say that you are aggressive. Don't lose your temper." "I remember," Gran smiled tiredly. "My goal now is to get out of this marriage, protect Annie, and save the business. And then, who knows, maybe I'll finally have a chance to meet a normal woman again." "I'm sure it will," Patrick patted him on the shoulder. "You're a real man. It's just that life tests your strength." In the depths of his soul, Grand felt gratitude to his friend and a slight hope. He remembered how once, even before meeting Cassandra, he thought that he would not be able to love anyone after Laura's death. Then he seemed to make up his mind, but came across betrayal. Maybe everything is really ahead, a thought flashed. However, so far the entire focus has been on the legal battle. The day of preliminary hearing has arrived. Grand arrived at the Greene County Circuit Courthouse in the morning, along with Beverly. Lawyers, plaintiffs, defendants, and their relatives had already gathered in the lobby. Grand felt the familiar tension in his shoulders. His heart was beating faster. He noticed that Cassandra was sitting on a bench in the corridor, next to her lawyer, Mr. Blaine, a man of about 50 with a balding crown and a red beard. She avoided looking at Grand, but from the way her lips were compressed and her knees were shaking, it was clear that she was nervous. The procedure was that the judge would hear the parties, clarify whether there was ground for further proceedings, and whether an amicable agreement could be reached. When everyone entered the courtroom, the judge, Mrs. Sutty Hudson, a stern but friendly-looking woman of about 60, took her seat and asked the lawyers to outline the essence of the dispute. Beverly stood up. "Your Honor, we have filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences and the infidelity of the defendant, Mrs. Cassandra Mitchell. We are ready to support this with documentary evidence. Previously, the parties tried to conclude a settlement agreement, but the defendant refused to sign it." Then Mr. Blaine stood up. "Your Honor, for our part, we declare that Mrs. Mitchell suffered from emotional pressure from her husband, who controlled all finances and did not allow her to dispose of even part of the family." "Let me," Beverly interrupted him. "We have information that Mrs. Mitchell carried out dubious financial transactions behind the client's back, and on an especially large scale." The judge raised her hand. "Stop, colleagues. We're not at the main hearing. Today, we only understand whether there is a prospect for a settlement agreement or whether it is necessary to schedule court hearings." Mrs. Hudson then turned to Cassandra. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you sure you want to formally contest the divorce?" Cassandra looked at the lawyer. He nodded to her. "Yes, Your Honor. I believe that my husband unfairly accuses me of all sins and is trying to leave me without a livelihood." The judge sighed heavily. "It's clear. This means that you will have to go through a full legal process." She looked at Grand and Beverly. "Are you prepared for the discovery of your financial records, the subpoenaing of witnesses, and possibly a fraud hearing?" "Yes, we are ready," Beverly answered without hesitation. As a result, the judge found that the main hearing of the case would begin in a month and a half, and during this time both parties must present the entire package of evidence, all financial reports, correspondence, etc. "I really hope," the judge leaned back in her chair with a tired look, "that you will be able to reach an agreement before a protracted litigation unfolds. But if not, we will analyze everything according to the letter of the law." With that, the preliminary hearing ended. The Grand left the hall with a gloomy face. It seems that Cassandra decided to go all the way, hoping that her testimony about emotional pressure would somehow outweigh all her failures. "Okay," he thought, "if that's the case, we'll have to bring all the dirt to court." She chose this path herself. During the weeks of preparation for the main trial, Grand received an unexpected call from Lance. He was clearly nervous. "Grand, I have something new. We need to meet. More documents? Or do you want to ask for help again?" Grand asked, feeling irritated. "Both. I dug up facts that Cassandra not only fooled me, but also a couple of other people. One of them was her boss at the clinic. That's why she was fired. Grand snorted. Come on, what if she had an affair with him too? I don't know, Lance sighed, but I'm sure she ran false invoices through their accounting, attributing additional services to patients and cashing out some of the money. It sounds crazy, but I talked to some of the employees. There are schemes that could lead to not only civil, but also criminal charges. If such fraud becomes known in court, Cassandra will have a hard time. The Grand understood. This is a powerful trump card. Not just her betrayal, but possible criminal liability. This will definitely convince her lawyer to drop the blanket accusations of emotional abuse. But the question remains, how can Grand confirm Lance's words? Okay, let's meet and discuss, he said, trying to remain calm. As a result, they conspired to meet in a cafe near Beverly's lawyer's office. Lance brought a folder with copies of some official documents of the clinic, including reports on supposedly issued insurance and payment for procedures that were not actually performed. Cassandra's signature was on several documents as administrator confirming payment. Now, I don't know how she pulled it off. Lance nervously wipes sweat from his forehead. But she clearly falsified some of the reports. If this doesn't come up in court, maybe it will come up as part of some separate investigation. Maybe her former clinic has already filed a complaint with the State Insurance Commission. It looks like Cassandra is a master of gray schemes, Grand noted gloomily, leafing through the pieces of paper. But how will this help me in a divorce? If she loudly accuses you, puts forward some false accusations, you will have a counterattack. You hand over her machinations to the authorities, and she risks being left not only without money, but also with a real criminal case. This may cause her lawyer to reconsider the position. It makes sense. Grand leaned back in his chair, looking at Lance with an inscrutable face. Okay, I'll take these papers to my lawyer. And remember, if this is all a fake or a setup, I will put you down first. I understand, Lance shrugged. I got myself into trouble, but at least I want to get out of here with minimal damage. And if possible, so that Cassandra doesn't ruin my life with her scams. After reading several more documents diagonally, Grand noted that it was indeed possible to discern a system of false signatures, forgery of digital payment codes, and the appointment of fictitious medical services. Everything looked quite convincing. Apparently, she was looking for easy money, he thought bitterly, but in the family she pretended that she was saving their budget. Grand took the folder to Beverly Sanders. She flipped through the documents and immediately became dignified. Wow, if this is all genuine, then Cassandra has serious problems. I think so too, Grand nodded. Lance claims that this was taken from the clinic's internal databases. I asked him to clarify the source if necessary. Amazing. Now we have one more trump card. I'll call Cassandra's lawyer and gently hint that if they don't return to peace talks, this whole thing will be in the works. The judge can transfer the materials to the prosecutor, and then her client will end up facing criminal charges. A double feeling stirred inside Grand. On the one hand, he understood that this was an all-in game, when you push your ex-husband to the wall with the threat of revealing her crimes. On the other hand, since she herself chose blackmail and lies, then let her bear the consequences. Go for it, Bev, he said firmly. I don't want Annie to suffer for a long time because of protracted legal wars. If the threat of a criminal case makes Cassandra come to her senses, so be it. Exactly. The lawyer put the documents in a folder. Let her learn a lesson. While everything was getting ready for the main battle on the legal front, Grand had changes in his personal life. Annie began going to counseling with the school psychologist, Miss Langley. On the first evening after the visit, the girl went into Grand's kitchen, where he was preparing dinner, chicken soup, and hot sandwiches. Dad, I talked to Miss Langley today. She listened so attentively that I started crying. I hope she helped. I felt better because I realized I shouldn't blame myself for what happened. She said that sometimes adult lies have nothing to do with children and we can't control it. Wise words, Grand agreed, feeling grateful to the psychologist. You know, sometimes I feel sorry for Cassandra. I think about why she became so insidious. Maybe she had injuries or something else as a child. Don't know. And honestly, I don't want to know, Grand shrugged. It is important that this is not your responsibility. Our task is to save ourselves. Annie nodded and helped her father cut the sandwich bread. Despite everything she had experienced, the girl's confidence grew that she and her father would cope. Grand watched her, and his heart sank with pride. She was becoming mature beyond her years. A couple of days later, Grand walked into Patrick's auto repair shop after work. He was diagnosing the car, and there was something knocking under the hood. Grand waited until he finished and said, "Pat, do you think I'll ever be able to build a normal family again?" "Of course, buddy. Why such a question?" "It's just that now all of this marriage, relationship seems like hell to me. First Laura's death, then Cassandra's betrayal. Maybe it's better for me to live alone with Annie so as not to expose us to risks. Don't become isolated. When everything calms down, life itself will bring you a meeting with a person who will truly appreciate you. The main thing is, don't try to immediately jump into a new relationship out of pain." Patrick rubbed his forehead, then grinned. "Yes, and not everything in the world is built on betrayal. Believe me, there are good people." "Thanks, buddy." Grand didn't know if he would find the strength to trust someone else, but Patrick's words sounded reassuring. For now, he decided to focus on protecting his family from Cassandra and her adventures. At the end of the 4th week after the preliminary hearing, Grand received a call from Mr. Blaine, Cassandra's lawyer. He spoke slowly, formally. "Mr. Mitchell, hello. Contacted Mrs. Mitchell, and we would like to clarify whether you really have any materials incriminating my client of financial impropriety." "Yes, there is," Grand confirmed firmly. "And are you ready to bring them to court if we can't reach an agreement?" "Undoubtedly. Moreover, I can not only present, but also write a statement to the prosecutor's office about possible fraud. This will no longer be just a civil matter." There was a short pause, then Mr. Blaine said, "Fine. We would like, perhaps, to reconsider the terms and return to a settlement agreement. With pleasure, if it is fair. Mrs. Sanders, your lawyer, will call you to discuss the details." Grand put the phone away and breathed a sigh of relief. This means that Cassandra's blackmail did not work, and she herself was afraid of the real consequences. Now, if she agrees to the original or even stricter conditions, Grand will be able to quickly complete this matter. That's pretty much what he expected. But knowing Cassandra, he was in no hurry to rejoice. There could be some other trick. The following week, Beverly informed Grand that Cassandra's team had been in contact with her office, attempting to arrange a meeting. The parties agreed on a date and decided to meet in the meeting room of a law office to discuss options for ending the case without unnecessary pretentiousness. 3 key points were important for Grand. The house belongs to him and remains his. He continues to own the business and Cassandra does not receive any share. The absence of alimony or monthly support for the wife is an exclusively one-time payment, and if there is one, it will be a strictly specified amount. On the morning in question, Grand arrived with Beverly. Mr. Blaine and Cassandra herself were present at the meeting in the meeting room. Seeing Grand, she lowered her eyes, nodding hello only once. She looked depressed and tired. You could see that she had lost weight and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Colleagues, we are here to try to reach an agreement that suits both parties," Beverly began with a professional smile. "As I have been told, Mrs. Mitchell wishes to resolve the dispute without the main legal process." "Yes," Mr. Blaine nodded. "My client believes that further proceedings will be harmful for both parties." Cassandra sat without looking up while the lawyer said, "We are ready to agree to waive claims to the house and the company, but my client asks for a fixed amount of compensation for 5 years of marriage and a certain part of the savings, which, in her opinion, were joint." "How many?" Beverly asked calmly. 50,000. Grand restrained himself from swearing. He knew that this was obviously overpriced. "This is impossible," he snapped. "I was initially ready for 20. Now the maximum is 25." Sorry, this is funny. In 5 years, Mr. Blaine began. We have evidence that Mrs. Mitchell stole much larger sums from our family account, not to mention possible manipulations at work. Beverly joined in. You don't want us to give all this to the court, right? Cassandra finally looked up. They showed despair and anger, but she remained silent. But Blaine fidgeted in place. I understand what documents you are talking about. However, we need something that will allow my client to solve her financial problems. Mrs. Mitchell's financial problems arose solely because of her own actions. Of course, my client is not obliged to solve them. Beverly looked at him coldly. However, we offer a compromise, payment of $25,000 and permission to keep her Toyota car. At the same time, she undertakes to sign a divorce agreement indicating her guilt, waive any alimony and possible claims of emotional abuse. For some time, there was silence in the room. It seemed that Cassandra's lawyer and she herself were tossing between the desire to bargain for more and the fear of what could happen if the case went to trial with incriminating evidence taken into account. Finally, Blaine threw up his hands. Okay, but let's clarify that the car is not burdened with any credit obligations. There were 2 payments left. We're ready to close them. It's a few $100s, no problem, Beverly said. Then you will receive documents for the car as the property of Mrs. Mitchell. Everyone looked at Cassandra. She pursed her lips. 30,000, she said, barely audible. 25, Grand repeated sternly. And not a cent more. Cassandra's gaze darted from Grand to Blaine, from Blaine to Beverly. Finally, she sighed and nodded. Okay, to hell with you. I agree, she said in a cracked voice. Grand felt elated relief inside, and Beverly nodded, celebrating the success. Mr. Blaine began telling the secretary legal language. $25,000 within 30 days from the date of signing the agreement. Refusal of any further demands. Divorce by mutual consent, but with the wording due to the fault of the defendant. Then everyone went into the office, where Beverly's secretary printed out the divorce agreement. It clearly stated, Grand Mitchell retains the house, business, and all accounts registered in his name. Cassandra Mitchell receives a one-time payment of $25,000 plus ownership of a Toyota car. The parties waive further financial claims against each other. The parties acknowledge that the divorce proceeding was due to the defendant's infidelity, third-party interference, and lack of trust, and do not make false allegations of emotional or physical abuse. Annie, Grand's daughter from her first marriage, has no legal or alimony relationship with the defendant. Communication remains exclusively voluntary on Annie's part. Mr. Blaine tried to make minor adjustments a couple of times, but Beverly was adamant. In the end, Cassandra, barely hiding her irritation, signed it. Grand signed next. The lawyers confirmed the act with their signatures as witnesses. All that remains is to submit this document to the court, and if the judge approves, the case will be completed without additional hearings. When it was all over, Beverly walked out into the corridor with Grand. Cassandra remained in the office with her lawyer. A strange combination of relief and a certain bitter aftertaste reigned in Grand's soul. He won, but the victory came at the cost of emotional losses. Now all he wanted was to quickly get rid of her presence in his life. Congratulations, Grand, Beverly said, shaking his hand. I think now we will be able to issue a court decision within a few weeks without scandals. Thank you, Bev. Without your help, I would have gotten stuck in a legal quagmire, he answered gratefully. This is my job, but I'm glad that we were able to do without bloody trials. Yes, I had to pay a little, but my nerves and reputation were saved. Gran nodded. They walked to the elevator, silently realizing that everything was nearing the end. In the parking lot near the office building, Gran suddenly saw Cassandra standing by her Toyota as if waiting for him. Blaine has already left. He came closer. What do you need? He asked tiredly. I wanted to talk. The last word, if you don't mind. Speak. Gran crossed his arms over his chest. She smiled wryly. You know, I'm sorry it turned out this way. Sometimes I wonder why I didn't stop in time. It seems that I wanted a better life, but it turned out that I ruined everything. Yes, you ruined it, and I'm also sorry that I believed that you were worthy of being my wife. Do you think I'm a monster? No, just a person who chose deception and betrayal, trying to make money at the expense of others. I don't know your inner motives, and I don't want to know. Okay, okay, I guess you don't need me anymore. She sighed and looked away. You won. Congratulations. I didn't strive for victory, said Grand, feeling bitter. I wanted honesty and peace for my family. But since you presented me with a fact, Cassandra wiped away a tear that seemed genuine, but Grand could no longer believe a single emotion of hers. Okay, goodbye, he added dryly. She nodded, climbed into the car, and started the engine. Without saying another word, she drove out of the parking lot, joining the traffic. Grand stood for another minute, as if checking whether this was really the end. Then he got into his pickup truck and went home with a sigh. That evening, when Annie returned from school, he told her what had happened. We signed a settlement agreement. I will pay her compensation, but she will no longer be able to claim either the house or our life. So it's definitely over, Dad. Relieved hope flashed in Annie's eyes. Yes, all that remains is to wait for the court to formally register the divorce. But this is just a formality. There will be no hearings. The daughter clung to her father. Thank you. For what? Grand ran his hand through her hair. Because you didn't break down, and because you didn't let her manipulate me too. I was so afraid that she would come back and make us suffer again. It's all over, Annie. It's all behind us. That evening, the two of them made pizza from ready-made dough and put on the TV an old family movie that the three of them had once watched together, back when Cassandra seemed good. But now they looked without bitterness. It was, rather, a symbol that life goes on, and we need to learn lessons from the past, but not drag it into the future. Several more days passed, and finally papers arrived from the court. The marriage has been dissolved. The terms of the agreement have been approved. Grand sat on the porch of his house with a cup of freshly brewed coffee, looking at the rising sun over the roofs of neighboring houses. It seemed to him that a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. It was officially all over. There was no longer any Cassandra in his life. Annie, leaning out of the doorway, asked, Dad, is everything okay? Yes, honey, everything is fine. There will certainly be new challenges ahead, but he won the main battle. He saved the house, the business, did not let Cassandra trample him into the mud, and most importantly, he saved Annie from mental trauma as much as possible. Yes, there were scars in his soul, but they were the ones that reminded him that he should not lose vigilance and faith in himself. Soon Grand threw the last things that reminded him of Cassandra into the trash. A flyer from the dental clinic, a photo of them together from one of their trips. He did not want to cherish these memories. They were saturated with lies. He left only invisible lessons that will now become part of his life experience. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.